The Persian wheel, also known as the sakia, is a system that's actually been around since at least the Hellenistic period. Now, I first came across this whilst on holiday in Tunisia, and straight away it caught my attention. Now, seeing a camel tied to a machine, calmly walking around in circles, isn't something that you come across very often. Now, at the time, I didn't really think too much of it, but what I didn't realise then was just how important this simple-looking machine actually was. Because this isn't just, a water mill, it's actually a piece of technology that's helped shape entire societies and played a major role in helping shape the Islamic Golden Age. So where did the idea of lifting water actually begin? Now, to really understand the sakia, you have to actually go back much further to around 2000 BCE in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Now, at this particular time, there were some of the earliest water lifting technologies were being developed, including one of the most simplest but most effective devices called the Shadoof. Now, it was made up of a long pole acting as a lever with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. Now, the idea was basically simple. You just pull the bucket down into the water and the counterweight would help lift it back up once it was actually full. That water could then be poured into irrigation channels or into storage containers. Now, this made lifting water much easier, but it still had one major limitation, as it could only move one bucket at a time. But what if you didn't have to lift just one bucket, but dozens at once? This was actually achieved in the 4th century BCE as a new system actually started to appear, which was something much closer to the Persian wheel. Now, this was called the bucket and chain mechanism. And instead of just lifting one container at a time, it used a continuous loop of buckets attached to a rope or belt. And as the system actually turned, the buckets dipped into the water and carried it up in a steady flow. Now, though this was a big improvement, it still relied heavily on human effort to actually keep it moving. So what actually changed that made this system so much more powerful? Now, that leap actually came in the 3rd century BCE with the development of the sakia, aka the Persian wheel. Now, instead of relying on people, it actually used animal power. Animals like camels, donkeys, oxen and horses would actually walk around in a circle, turning a horizontal gear. That gear would then connect to a vertical gear attached to the water wheel. Now, this setup made a huge difference as it allowed for much more efficient transfer of motion and force, meaning water could be lifted from much deeper sources, often around 10 to 20 meters or even more. It also represents one of the most earliest widespread uses of complex gearing in everyday technology. And because it was actually powered by animals, it could actually run for much longer periods than the human-powered systems. This is why this system spread so widely, as one of the biggest advantages of the sakia was how adaptable it was. You could scale it up by increasing the size of the wheel or even just adding some more buckets, depending on how much water that you actually needed. Now, it could be used in wells, rivers and agricultural fields, making it incredibly versatile. And most importantly, it allowed for year-round irrigation. Instead of relying on, the seasonal rainfall, farmers could access a steady water supply, which massively improved agricultural productivity. But how did this technology actually go from local use to something that could actually be used across entire empires? As after its development, the sakia actually spread rapidly between the 3rd century BCE and around 500 CE. It was actually used across Egypt, Greece and the Roman Empire. Now, in Egypt, it became essential for lifting water from the Nile and irrigating farmland. Greek engineers refined the mechanics behind it, especially gearing and rotary motion, and the Romans actually adopted similar principles into their own technologies, particularly water mills, using gears to power millstones for grinding grain on a large scale. So this wasn't just, a farming tool anymore. It actually became part of a much bigger system of production and engineering. But when did this technology actually reach its peak? As the real advancements actually came during the Islamic Golden Age between 700 and 1500 CE. Because during this particular time, engineers refined the sakia even further. Gearing systems became more precise and durable, allowing machines to actually operate more efficiently and lift water from even greater depths. You had scholars like Al-Jazari who documented complex mechanical devices, helping push forward the understanding of hydraulics and engineering. As some of these machines were incredibly incredibly sophisticated with over 200 individual parts. And they weren't limited to one region. They were actually used across a wide range of environments, from the deserts of North Africa to the very fertile plains of Spain. But what kind of impact did this actually have on everyday life? As the sakia played a major role in transforming agriculture by providing a steady and reliable supply, it actually made it possible to grow crops like rice, citrus fruits, sugarcane, and cotton. This led to increased food production, population growth, and the expansion of cities and trade networks. And it wasn't just used in farming. These systems were also supplied to water the cities, gardens, and public baths, making them an essential part of everyday life. So why is something this old still being used today? Because despite its age, the sakia hasn't disappeared. In places like Tunisia and across parts of North Africa, it's still in use. And one of the main reasons for it is its affordability. As unlike modern irrigation systems which require expensive machinery and infrastructure, the sakia can actually be built using local materials like wood and metal. And it's also incredibly practical in areas where electricity is limited because it runs on animal power, and it doesn't rely on modern energy sources at all. And its simple design means it can be repaired and maintained using basic tools, making it a reliable long-term solution. But is it just a machine, or is it something more? As beyond its practical use, the sakia holds real cultural significance in places like Tunisia, as it represents a direct link to the past, something that connects modern communities to centuries of history. Many are preserved not just for their function, but also part of the cultural heritage, helping to educate and inform future generations. As standing there, watching a camel slowly walking around in circles, it's easy to think that, it's just like a simple machine. But in reality, it's so much more than that. It's a piece of technology that's helped shape civilizations, a system that supported, agriculture, trade, and daily life for centuries. And even today, in a world that's full of advanced technology, it's a reminder that some of the most efficient solutions are often the most simplest ones.